you're looking for interpersonal issues involved in onset and maintenance. You have 6 to maybe 9 sessions. You don't have a lot of time in therapy. You have virtually no time where you're at. So one of the things you have to do when taking IPT on is you have to be willing to overlook things that are compelling to look at when you're doing a history taking. So, for example, parent divorce, abuse, sexual orientation, something else, some other kind of trauma. Now for you see this all the time, and so people come in specifically maybe to talk about this. But let's say you have a case where somebody comes in, talk about depression, you go through and talk about this, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, by the way, I had an abuse experience at age 6. Okay? Now with Adam, it's pretty clear because you have this documentation. Somebody died, let's say a grandparent died. That's the other thing, it's a death. What you have to do with this treatment, because it's so focused and you're really trying to stay on task, is that you have to ask yourself, was the abuse experience related in any way to either the onset or current maintenance of the depressive episode? And if the answer is yes, then it becomes relevant. If the answer is no, it's not that it's not important, but it becomes less relevant in terms of your focus of the treatment, because you don't have the luxury to go and focus on that, which might be important. But if you've got 6 sessions, you've got a depressed kid, or you've got somebody with an eating disorder, and this is important but non-related to the symptoms, you don't focus on it. And that's so hard because you want to, and you feel like it's important because this significant event happened. You explore it, you talk about it, you find out about it, what occurred, what did they do, how did they manage it, has it, when was the last time you thought about that? When was the last time that came up? When was the last time you had like a re-experiencing? What was your symptoms like? Did you find that did it change you, the way you did change your eating at all? Did you find yourself getting depressed during that time? How did you manage that? Well, I did. I talked with my therapist and blah, 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 and actually I ended up feeling okay, and since then I've been feeling okay. So then it's like, well, do we trust that? Do we see that it's related, yes or no? Most of the time, it's really difficult because I have to tell people you have to be able to find ways to put on blinders, because these things, albeit important, may not be related to the onset and maintenance, and may in fact take you off track and take you someplace else, which might, if you have the luxury of having an extensive therapy, you might have the luxury to be able to deal with these things that might help them feel better about themselves as a person, etc. But are they related to the onset and maintenance of the disorder? And if they're not, you almost kind of have to therapeutically ignore it, in service of the greater good, which is that they have depression. Now, some people would feel like this always trumps everything because this is the driver of all psychopathology, So, and again, in this particular case, it was clear he felt tainted. It was then magnified by the mistreatment. It's interesting because it was a homosexual trauma, right? Right. And so then isn't it interesting that a pregnant woman, isn't that fascinating? It's a pregnant woman who's then the embodiment of fertility and heterosexual connection, criticizes him and says that he's bad.
Motherhood, he had problems with his mother too. Like his mother was very cold. He described her as very cold.
Yeah, so all of those kind of early, and typically at that age, having a pregnant teacher, you'd have this more there'd be more this eroticized connection that, kind of these pre-adolescent males would have with their, middle school teachers, especially one who's pregnant. There's a lot of things, there's just a lot of things that are percolating during that time anyway. So isn't that amazing that would happen for him? I mean, what a kick in the gut to have had that experience and then have that embodiment of heterosexual connection basically like destroy him. you know, and then that thing with his mom. So it's very clear. This was very clear. This is very significant. And I'm not saying don't pay attention to this. You explore it. You explore it. You explore sexual orientation. And again, this comes up over and over and over again. If you're lesbian, I can care less. If you're gay, it doesn't bother me. It's great. You know, if it's not related to, it's like if coming out or being gay is not related to your depression, then it's like, why am I having a discussion about it? You know, especially this comes up like in groups. Well, should I tell people I'm gay? I don't care. Tell them if you want to. You know, but if it's, I don't care, and I'm not going to out you if it's not related to why you're in the group. You know, but then again, these are the things that become important. Death usually is something that's significant, and I would say the same thing with abuse, that when these things come up, they ought to, like, obviously, and you think about this all the time anyway, given the nature of your work, it's like, oh, okay, this is coming up. But I've also seen some people that because they're exclusively working in this trumps everything else, and they have a tendency to either look for it or see it and view this as being the precipitating factor, and it may or may not be. That's all I'm trying to get you to think about. It may or may not be, but what you need to do, instead of making the assumption, is to actually check it out in terms of the data and looking at, did it change the profile? Did it change the symptoms? Did things get worse? Did things get better? And really look at it in terms of from the entire perspective, from the onset to the current status. And what role does that have in that? That would be the suggestion there.